So after a pretty chaotic week 3 in the UFL, we enter the final week of the first month of the season. Week 4 is underway here soon, but first let's go ahead and rank these teams amongst each other. Let's dive right into it. We start at number 8 with the Columbus Aviators. This was a pretty surprisingly good game for Columbus in that one. They played a tight game against one of the better teams in the league, and they set themselves up with a chance late, even with everything that transpired before the game. McLennan had an efficient game for the most part, did throw 2 pretty bad interceptions, including the pick 6, but also finished with 230 yards and 2 touchdowns with only 8 incompletions to boot. The ground game wasn't great, but it did get 3.7 yards per carry, so that's solid and one that I'm definitely happy with, but still would like to see it a bit more of a factor. The defense was also a bit of a surprise. They did well in that game, and they did what they needed to do to give them that chance late in this one. With the main thing is they kept Tyler Vaughns in check in this game. By doing so, it made Austin Reed only throw for 147 yards on 60% completion in this game. They guarded the run okay, but they did give up 4.6 yards per carry, but it was only on 18 carries, so you give and take there. They get their get back next week against this Dallas team, and it should lead to another good game, but with how the whole week unfolded, they sit in place at number 8. I don't typically do this with my rankings, but also in at number 8, it is the Louisville Kings. The offense had a better showing this week compared to what they had last week, and that is to be expected. When you play a team in back-to-back weeks, the preparation is going to be better. Jason Bean had 50% completion in this game, 3 touchdowns, and 352 yards through the air. Definitely played a lot better in this game than he did through the first 2 weeks of the season. The ground game continues to still be a bit absent, but they're starting to lay the groundwork for it to be a solid unit. They had 4 yards per carry in this game, and they are going to be signing James Robinson this over the week, as Ian Wheeler is going to be missing some time, it seems, due to injury. So James Robinson is back with the team after spending the offseason with them and getting released right before the season. The defense struggled throughout the game, not really able to make many stops. They forced 1 punt in this one and forced 1 turnover on downs late. But besides that, they struggled until they got to overtime. And overtime is an entirely separate beast to go over with this game. All I'm going to say is I'll be thoroughly surprised if that overtime rule is not changed in the near future. Most likely at the very latest by the start of next season. I feel like that's going to be changed at some point soon. But again, a whole different beast to go over with that. It was a tough loss in overtime with how they lost that game and how they were playing in overtime up until that point. At the end of the day, it was tough for me to make a large enough difference between the Columbus Aviators and the Louisville Kings to make the next part of these rankings make sense. So I said, screw it, just put them both in at the 8th slot and just go from there. And the main reason behind 2 teams at 8 is the Houston Gamblers being at number 7. I had to move the Gamblers down at least 1 spot after their second blowout loss in the first 3 weeks of the season. They just had to have been moved down. But the issue was in week 3, neither the Aviators nor the Kings really made that much of a difference between themselves for me to want to put them at 6. So we have the Gamblers at 7 and both the Kings and Aviators at 8. As for the Gamblers, it was a tough card that they got draw leading up to this game. Tauela Tagovailoa had to be the starter as injuries to Hunter Deckers and Nolan Henderson put them out in this game, and Tagovailoa never really found a rhythm in this one. The defense from the start struggled against this DC team. They gave up a 60-plus yard rushing touchdown on the second play from scrimmage for the DC offense. 4 drives into this game, you pretty much knew that these 2 teams were nowhere near the same level of play. It was a thorough beatdown that the Gamblers had against them in this week. And I'm not even sure if the quarterback really mattered in this game, either if it was Deckers or Henderson. But we will see what goes on at that quarterback position going forward, as that's going to be a very key part for this team to try and figure out, even with all the injuries. Deckers seemingly out long term. Nolan Henderson in question for Thursday night. So it very well might be another tough week for Houston, but you never really do know. They're at home on Thursday night on technically a short week, so we shall see. But after another bad loss to begin the year, I had to move them down 1 spot to number 7. So with nobody at number 6, the Birmingham Stallions find themselves at number 5. About as bad of a start as it could have been for the Stallions, with 2 interceptions on the first 3 drives of this game, including a pick 6 from deep inside their own territory. A 6-point deficit entering half in hostile territory. It was a very rough first half for the Stallions team. But then the second half started, and it was about as good of a second half as they could have asked for. It got them right back into this game to the point where they were leading by 10 entering the fourth quarter. And then everything just kind of stopped for this Stallions team. Nothing really was able to get going on offense. The defense completely fell apart. It was a really tough fourth quarter for them, and thus they fell one spot because of it. Matt Corral did show nice resilience, bouncing back from that tough start. The defense forced 3 turnovers in this game, one of them being a pick six and back-to-back interceptions as well. Once again, they also made some pretty solid stands in the red zone pretty early on in this game. The ending was just way too tough, and this is back-to-back weeks now for the Stallions team where they just can't close out a game late. They're looking very similar to what we saw from the Renegades the past 2 years, and that's not really a good spot you want to be in when only the top 4 teams make the playoffs this year, and you don't have the benefit of the doubt of being in a conference anymore. So it's going to be an interesting rest of the season for them. They have their home opener next week against Orlando. That should be a pretty interesting game to watch. And time will tell with the Stallions team and if AJ McCarron can have him ready to play once again for next week. And really just how the entire vibe around this team is going to be compared to what we are accustomed to with the Stallions from years past. We shall see. They fit at number 5. And number 4, the St. Louis Battlehawks, the other side of that roller coaster game from week 3. And St. Louis, they were the ones that luckily came out on the other end of it. It went from perfect to completely awful to, hey, they won and we can go home and having be 2-1 and enjoy ourselves before having to play next week against a very heated rival in DC. Brandon Silvers started the game for St. Louis, and he didn't play great, but he was also playing in a way where it felt like they could have won with him behind center. But nonetheless, they felt like they needed to jumpstart the offense, so in comes Harrison Frost. And boy, that second half was probably the worst possible start for Harrison Frost. 0 for 3, 2 interceptions, those interceptions being on the first 2 pass attempts he had of this game. But at the end of the day, he showed some fantastic resilience in this one. He led a near perfect fourth quarter to get that comeback win. It was a roller coaster of emotions in St. Louis. But it does feel like that they have the quarterback situation now kind of more so figured out. Harrison Frost, when he got into a rhythm in that fourth quarter, he played a lot better than what we saw from Brandon Silvers throughout most of the season so far. Hakeem Butler finally had the game we're kind of used to him having. 100 plus yards on the day and really just making his presence felt. The ground game played fine, probably want a bit more from it, but still, I'll take it. And the defense, it started good, they finished strong even with how rough it got at some points in that one. All around, a good win. Doesn't move them too far up the rankings, but they do move up one spot to number 4. Number 3 is the Orlando Storm. They got the win, but man, that was probably the worst way that game could have ended if for anyone but being an Orlando Storm fan or a player on the Storm. They played a pretty solid game in that one, at least offensively. The defense at times did okay, but for the most part, I definitely wanted to see more from this Orlando team that just a week prior played Louisville really well, and all of a sudden, I'm not able to play them as well as they were just a week ago. It makes things a bit tough, especially in overtime when they constantly struggle to punch it in from the 5-yard line. It was a bit weird. They got saved due to the penalty rule, and I mentioned it earlier in this video. I expect that rule to be changed at some point in the future. But still, the biggest storyline from this game, aside from the penalties and overtime and all that, is how this team showed up and was prepared for this game. Because I was expecting them to be a lot more prepared than they were. Anthony Beck got some issues, got some questions for after that game about how he prepared his guys. Because yes, they got the win, but man, they definitely should have probably handled things a bit better. And yes, it was their first road game. Louisville's a great environment to play in, and a great environment especially for the Kings. But still, I was expecting a bit more from an Orlando team that held this same Louisville team to just 9 points a week prior. They have another really good test next week as they travel to Birmingham for the home opener for the Stallions. That should be a really fun game. The Stallions playing angry after back-to-back really tough late-game losses. So we shall see how this one goes. But for now, the Storm do slot into number 3 on the ranking. Number 2 is the DC Defenders, and after back-to-back weeks of scoring 40-plus points and back-to-back really dominant blowout wins for this Defenders team, I was tempted to move them up to number 1, but decided against it for at least one more week, mainly because of just Dallas still being Dallas at the end of the day. Deion Jackson continues to be a standout player for this offense. Jordan Ta'amu, he's continuing to just simply do enough through the air, not doing too much, not doing too little, doing just enough to lead this team to some really nice wins. The home opener for DC could not have gone any better. The defense held Houston to 7 points. They were in full control of that game from the very jump. Really, this game was a no contest after the first quarter, much in the same way it felt like the game against Columbus was a no contest after the first quarter to some degree. This DC team really took their week 1 loss to St. Louis personally and have made it everybody else's problem so far. And the fun thing about this season is that they're going to have their chance to get their get back this week in week 4 as they host the Battlehawks. That should be game of the week. I'll talk more about that specific matchup on Thursday when we go through predictions. But that should be a really fun game. And as for now, it definitely could be a bit higher, but I'm going to sit them comfortably at number 2. And then number 1, the Dallas Renegades. They got the win. It was their toughest game that they've played this season, and a pretty close one, a 5-point finish in that one. The high-flying offense wasn't quite there, in part because Tyler Vaughns was held in check for this game. The ground game stepped up to a degree. Day Hunter had another solid showing in this one. And the ground game as a whole, just over 3 yards per carry. So definitely I will take that. The defense had another really good showing with another pick 6 in this game and a really good first half that set up the late game being how it was for Dallas in this one. Reed threw the ball fine. He had some really good throws in this game, including the touchdown late, which ended up being the game-winning touchdown in this one. All around, though, a fine showing. Still a game that makes me feel good about them and how they're shaping up so far this season. But now the real test comes in. They had 3 straight home games to begin the year. So these final 2 or so months are really going to be a good test for Dallas, having to go on the road quite a few times, still having to play all 5 of the road games. Only 2 more home games on the year. So we'll see how they're able to handle that stage of the season. But throughout basically the first month, I do like what we have seen from the Dallas Renegades. So there you have it. Quick little rundown. The Columbus Aviators and Louisville Kings are at number 8. Houston Gamblers are at 7. Birmingham Stallions are at 5. St. Louis Battlehawks are at 4. The Orlando Storm are at 3, DC Defenders at 2, and the Dallas Renegades round things out at number 1. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I'll see you all next time. Have yourselves a damn good one.